Hi, I'm George the Antique Nomad. Come with me as I wander the country in search of valuable vintage, amazing antiques, and cool collectibles. We'll buy, sell, and trade at antique malls, shops, and shows, estate sales, flea markets, thrift stores, anywhere people go to find really interesting things that just aren't made anymore. So come on, let's go! Hello everybody, I am George the Antique Nomad with you again to bring you 20 interesting items that we are putting on eBay. These listings are going up as I speak. If you are a level 2 or level 3 member and you're seeing this, then you are getting first chance to take a look at these items and follow them in the marketplace, see how they do at auction on eBay, purchase them if you're interested. And for the rest of you folks, if you are not level 2 or level 3 members, well, we, thanks to them, are able to give you all access to this video as well. So you're also welcome to go to eBay and see if those items are still available. If they have sold, you'll be able to see what they went for and get information that way. And if they are still available, you can follow the bidding, track the progress, purchase if you like. So we have a lot of fun doing this. We do it as an experiment so that we can show what's happening in the market right now, an actual up-to-date picture of the auction market on eBay. We like to show a lot of different categories in these. We like to experiment with a lot of different things. We sometimes have little contests between pieces of merchandise, and we'll have a little bit of that this time too. So stay tuned. We're going to have a lot of fun. Let me grab the first item and we will tell you all about it. Our first item up this round is the Brown Derby Cookbook. And the Brown Derby, of course, was a very famous restaurant in Los Angeles. It was in the 3300 block of Wilshire Boulevard. Actually, that was their second building. The first building they built was shaped exactly like a Brown Derby hat. This was in the late 1920s when oddball things along highways were designed to lure motorists to get off and stop. And Los Angeles was becoming a major city and a major tourist attraction, so it made perfect sense that something like this would pop up. It was so successful that ultimately they operated 9 of them. But the original location on Wilshire Boulevard and the second location in Hollywood are the two most famous. And a lot of people don't realize there were multiple locations. A lot of movie stars came and went. This was right down the street from the Ambassador Hotel. So it was designed to be an attraction and it became a big attraction. It was actually based on a Brown Derby restaurant in New York that Wilson Meisner, who started the Brown Derby in LA, had seen, and it was a place that a lot of vaudevillians hung out. So he had the idea again of, well, let's get people who are involved with Hollywood to hang out here and then everyone will want to come, and it worked very well. By the 1940s, when this was published, people really wanted to know how to make the recipes that they sold. The book is in good shape. It's got a dust jacket. The dust jacket has some wear, as you can see, but all in all, it's in good shape, and the book itself is in excellent shape because the dust jacket has always protected it. And the dust jacket now has a plastic sleeve to protect it. It's got some neat illustrations. It's got a ton of recipes that were famous in the time, including things like 20-minute risotto, Brown Derby avocado mushroom stuffing. And it's in pretty good shape. There's a few corners that are folded because somebody really liked making stuffed round steak with cheddar cheese, apparently. So they needed to know where their recipe was. But for the most part, other than a few pages, this is another one that were actually used pretty frequently. This one is for asparagus soup a la Derby. Other than that, this book is in really good condition. It is a 1949 copy. The foreword is by Robert Cobb, who was the president and ultimately ran the Brown Derbies. It's a neat, fun piece, and this one is starting at just $19.99. I don't believe that I have a reserve on anything, so everything is just starting off, and we're going to let the market take it where it will. Our next items here, since we're on a 1940s, 1950s theme, are these lovely flamingos. Now, you all know I love flamingos. I'm a Florida guy. I spend part of my year there. I've just always collected these. I thought they were fun when I was a kid, and I haven't changed my mind about that. I still think they're pretty great. The reason I got these, and I picked these up when I was shopping in Colorado Springs with Yvonne Thrifty Rich at American Classics Marketplace, where she's a dealer, and we were there with Sarah of Traveling Button and Jason of Junk Drunk Mantiques. Because they like to pick there a lot. And they pointed out a space that they really loved with a lot of mid-century stuff, and these were in it. And I decided to buy them because not only are they attractive, but they are marked Occupied Japan. And that's something a little bit different. First of all, the flamingo craze really mostly was after the occupied era in Japan. Most of the big flamingo craze was in the mid-50s, but it was starting in the early 50s, and the occupation lasted from 1947 to 1952. Now, if you look at these, they're really pretty good quality. They're hand-painted well. They are every bit as nice as their California counterparts. The wear is very similar. The thing I find interesting with that is that, and the decorations all the way around, you see they've done the eyes and the wings on both sides. What I find interesting about that is a lot of people think Occupied Japan equals cheap because they were making a lot of really inexpensive things, you know, ceramics that cost 19 cents wholesale and things like that. These were more of a premium quality item. And a lot of Occupied Japan, because everything had to say Occupied Japan on it, that was made during those 5 years of the occupation. And so there were some really nice quality Occupied Japan things, and I think these are among them. It's got a TM mark. I do not know who that company is. It could be Tilso. I haven't been able to find anything to verify that that's an early mark of theirs or not. I have not been able to find any other companies that use that mark, and the only other listing of these I saw was from 2016, and they didn't know who TM was either. So that may be something that someone else will have to inform us about. And if you know, please do let us know. That would always be helpful. We always like to learn more about what we have. In any event, these are very attractive. They're well sculpted. I think they're a neat looking pair. I believe I'm starting them in the $45 to $50 range, and we're going to see where they go from there. I believe the set could sell for as much as $85 to $90 if I took it to Florida. I'll be curious to see what it does on eBay. Next up is this really cool display from a toy store or department store that somehow never got used. And I love new old stock stuff because we get to see what things really were like back in the day. We're not just looking at an object, we're looking at an entire store display. In this case, it is for little kids' clickers. The Tin Cricket, and these have 3 different styles you see, because of course this is 1960s. We've got cowboys, we've got cowgirls, and we've got Indians, or Native Americans, as we would say more properly now. This is all marked Cricket. Cricket was made in, as you can see here, made in Japan. And these are going to date to the late 1960s. It's nice to have the whole thing on a card. We do see these sometimes. For whatever reason, not everything got distributed in the old days. And sometimes there will be little finds of a box of something left over that never got out onto store shelves somehow. And this is one of those things. It was found in Illinois. It's never been used, so it's flawless, of course. I believe that this is starting around $35. My belief is that it could be worth as much as $50. There's not a whole lot to say about condition because it's never been used. So it's pretty much what you see is just like new. So I think someone will really have fun with this. It's a great graphic. A lot of people like to collect these sort of things. You see them in toy collections. You see them in man caves. And I just think it's neat. And I hope someone else does too. We'll find out. Well, our next 2 items are going to be our first little contest. We are going to see how some similar items from some different eras, in this case, stack up against each other. Our next 2 items are going to be pairs of bookends, and the first are these lions. And aren't they handsome and brassy? And of course, brass is very popular right now. These came from the collection of a 95-year-old man who bought them new in 1970. So we know that they've got a certain age and a certain background. I'm going to show you the bottom of this one because it tells us about the manufacturer. This is Philadelphia Manufacturing. And it says a product of the best American craftsmanship. And I have to say the craftsmanship on this really is good. The sculptor was very, very detailed. And so they have quite a classical look. And you can see on the back that they are finished with a plate number. That is a stock number, number 4156. This company is really well known for a pair of sailfish bookends they did around this time. I've had those before. They also did the Dachshunds Chewing the Books. That's a pretty famous group of theirs. So they're well known for a bunch of different things that they made, mostly in the 1960s and 70s. That seems to have been their heyday. So they were a little later than a lot of the other manufacturers of these things. It is Spelter, you can see in here, because one of them is missing the trap on the bottom. So you can see it's a mix of various white metal. There could be tin, there could be zinc. It's possible there's even lead, although by the 1970s, they're mostly taking lead out of manufacturing, so that's less likely in these. It is a whole bunch of different things, and then they put this nice brass patina, and they do the same thing that they would do with any sort of Spelter. They give it either a brass patina or a bronze patina, as you'll see in our next examples. These should sell somewhere in the $50 to $60 range. This pair does not come up as often. We actually see a lot more of those other designs that I was describing. So I'm curious to see how these will do. And I'm curious to see what their ultimate finishing price will be as compared to the next set that I'm going to show you. Let me get them. And here is that next pair. These, they're kind of heavy. Let me get them up where I can show you. These are by Jennings Brothers from Connecticut. And Jennings Brothers started in the late Victorian era and did metalwork and were particularly well known for bookends and other things that they did. And they have always commanded a bit of a premium because Jennings Brothers was considered very good in terms of their finish work, the materials they used, and the sculptures that they either had the rights to reproduce, like these, or items that they had made by sculptors to create metalwork at the time. So Jennings Brothers is considered very good, and I'll show you how you can tell these are Jennings Brothers in just a moment. But it says, in essence, I think in Latin, it's saying the Swiss motto, which I believe is Swiss fidelity and virtue, if I am understanding that correctly. Someone who knows Latin better than I can probably change that. But you're basically seeing the shield and the fallen lion. And so they're very dramatic, and they're actually rather large. They're also made of Spelter. Back in this day, it could have had other materials than the ones I described in the other bookends. They have felt bottoms of different colors because these were added later. The mark on the back is how you tell it's Jennings Brothers. See the JB mark down there? JB and the number. So the number 1570 is the stock number for the item, and JB is Jennings Brothers. And that is something to look for. If you see metalwork like this and you see two different items and one says JB and one doesn't, well, the likelihood is the one signed JB will probably sell for more money if they're similar in other ways. So that is part of the reason I wanted to show these, so you can learn a different maker, and we can see what this maker does versus the more modern maker in the marketplace, with something that has some similarity in motif. So I'm curious to see who gets these. I don't know if it'll be somebody who has a particular affinity for lions, or if it will be somebody who has a particular affinity or heritage that relates to the Swiss. But I have a feeling it'll be one of them or a bibliophile. We have a lot of things for bibliophiles this month. I guess I'm thinking that maybe with the holiday summer coming to a close that people will be indoors more and need to read, I guess, because our next item is also another book. And this particular book is St. Nicholas Illustrated from 1913. There would have been a couple of different volumes of this because St. Nicholas was actually a publication. It was a periodical that came out monthly, and they had a lot of good poets, a lot of good illustrators, including Arthur Rackham worked for them. And so they would take these and make these compendiums a couple of times a year. So this is 1913. You can see the very pretty embossed bindery and the gilding on it. A lot of people like to buy these just because they're handsome to look at, even from the outside. But these are also fun because they have a lot of interesting information on the inside too. This one covers the last part of 1912 and the first part of 1913. So you're going to see things that were contemporary at the time that look like a lot of nice antiques to us now, like that room full there with the kid trying to get the fruit out of what probably would be a very expensive basket now. And you see the ladies in the back dressed in their Gibson era finery. But this also has a whole lot of articles of interest, all sorts of different things. They have one on Woodrow Wilson, who was still a governor at that time. He had not yet become president, talking about his involvement with football and how he had helped the American game. There's this one, which is Runty the Boy Giant. He doesn't look runty at all, the poor thing. He's all lonely because he's huge and no one seems to want to associate with him. Poor guy. I'm sure it comes out better in the end. That's how these things usually do. So this is full of a lot of fun articles, and then they would discuss things like architecture and science and nature, and this was all geared towards a juvenile reader at the time, even though it looks like a pretty serious book. It also has a rather interesting public library ex libris in here. It's from Greenfield, which I believe was in Illinois. So it's an interesting book all the way around. I thought it was pretty. I think it's fun. And the last one of these I saw sold went for almost $50. Now, whether this one will or not, I'm not certain. The one that sold may have had a little less bumping, which is what you call it when they get worn at the tops and the bottoms of the spine. And this one, the spine is cracked. And what that means is when you open it up, does it give you any resistance or just does it fall loose as if it had been bent backwards and cracked, essentially? And so in this case, the spine is cracked, but it is a very good looking reading copy. I'm going to start it, I think, at just $20 and see what the market feels about these now. Our next item is quite sweet and really lovely the way it's done. It looks like the quality of Metlock. It does not have a Metlock or Villeray & Bach signature, but it is a 1/4 liter. You can see right here, marked 1/4 L, German Stein from about 1900 to 1910. It is a combination of hand painting. All of this trim work is painted, and then a very nice transfer to give the outline for additional coloration. It's really an interesting, cute, and slightly strange scene because it seems to be they're having rather a bacchanal. The bottom of it has these marks. If it said VB, then we would have a Metlock by Villeray & Bach, but it does not have the B after the V. So these appear to be stock numbers. There were other German companies that made Steins in the same style at the same time. This is from about 1910. That did really nice work too. Because this is not a Metlock, the initial price on this will not be all that high. I think that we're looking at something that will likely be priced. There's no lithophane or picture in the bottom either. So I think we're looking at something that will be priced under $100 to start, and we will see what happens with it, but it is just so cute and really well done. The thing that I think is the most interesting about this in terms of where it came from, and this is just based on notes that were left with it, so there's no way to verify this, but there were 2 notes left with it, so I'm pretty sure that they're telling the truth, and that is that a gentleman's father who had this got it at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. And that makes a lot of sense. This would have been the right era for that. It certainly would have been the style of things. It's the type of thing that tourists would buy. And it's also, because it's, a little flashier, a little more fun. And it's also definitely something you would have expected to see in the gift shop of the German Pavilion at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. So it all makes sense to me. I don't think that necessarily adds a premium to value, but it does add interest, and especially to those of us World's Fair wonks, it's fun for us to see the types of things they sold back at the World's Fairs. Now from there, we're going to jump forward and back in time at the same time by showing you this piece. This is a very cute little shell dish. It's got a very happy green color, and it is marked Murano glass. So we know from the little sticker there, as well as the color and the way that it's made, that this piece is 1950s. And it was in fact made by Fratelli Toso, which is one of the better known and more collectible names in Murano glass. But the thing I find interesting about this, and the reason it takes me back in time, is if you look at the way it's decorated, you notice it's got a whole lot of texture. Well, if you could feel it, or if I can show you on the bottom, this is all what they call glass frit. These are little tiny pieces of glass in the same color that they grind up, and then they spray it onto the piece that they're making. So they would cast this piece in clear. Notice the base is completely clear. If you hold it like that, you can see the base is clear. It is not green. The bowl is not actually green. The green is all of these little tiny, tiny pieces of glass, and that's why they called it overshot. This came about in the Victorian era originally, and the idea was that we are going to decorate glass by attaching while it's still very hot. We're going to spray little pieces on top of it, and they're going to fuse into the glass and give it the color and the texture. So overshot is a specific category of glass, and most of it is Victorian. This was an unusual idea in the 50s to bring this back as a way of decorating glass, and I think it was rather successful. I really like this piece. I could see having this piece in my home. However, I think I've got probably 5 or 6 shell soap dishes in my house as it is, so it's time to let somebody else have fun with this one. I'm starting it at $35. I believe they sell typically in about the $50 range, and we'll see what the market thinks of this one. I like it a lot personally. Well, this next piece is something that we see a lot in the 1920s in the United States, but we see them way back into the dynasties if you look at Asian cultures, and that is this. This is called a censer. It is essentially an incense burner in this case, or for any sort of thing that you're burning for scents in the house because it's rather deep. This is 1920s, and it is also spelter. You can see that it has a very well-defined lid. This elephant is in full regalia and is meant to be ridden through the streets of Delhi or someplace, I think, because it's got this very fancy topper to make the elephant into a carriage. This guy has so much detail. It's just amazing how well detailed this is. And this is why spelter was a popular material to use, because you could get a lot of detail because the metal is more malleable as opposed to bronze or that sort of thing. It does have a signature, which is rather unusual. You see it under there. It says Van Times, and that was one of the companies, I think they were out of New York, that did this sort of metalwork in the 1920s and early 30s. It was very popular. Elephants were very popular as well. Now, by the mid-30s, you would see the elephant with the trunk up because we were deep in the Depression, and superstition said that the trunk up was good luck. And so at that point, you would see the trunks up. But this one was done in the 20s, and they're really just making a more realistic depiction of how an elephant looks when it's walking with its trunk down. So that's what you get. And I think it's really a pretty piece. It's a different piece. This is where the incense goes. So you take this lid off and you have a small bowl. You can tell someone used it with the holes in the bottom. And then underneath, the rest of the body is a repository either for ashes or for more cone incense, or if you were burning sage or that sort of stuff, you might have put an extra supply in there. So it's 3 pieces. And I think that it is something that is going to appeal to either an elephant collector or someone who likes Asian or South Asian art and design, because it definitely has all of those aspects to it. So I'm curious to see who the ultimate collector will be for this. It seems like it's cross-collectible in a few different ways, and that's something I definitely look for, especially when posting on eBay. You know, they give you the option of posting even in multiple categories for an additional fee, and sometimes that makes sense because you might hit a collector in one category who might not ever think to look at the piece if it was only listed in one. I'm not doing that in this case, though. I think that I have the listing set so that people will find their way to this piece, But we'll bear that in mind. If it doesn't sell or it doesn't sell for a good price, then the next time we might list it in 2 categories. When I went to the Fenton convention last month in Marietta, Ohio, I got to meet Dave Fetty. He is a glassblower still to this day in his mid-80s. He worked from Fenton from 1964 until they closed. He had worked for Blanco before, and he moved up from being what they called a carry boy, who carried things to and from the furnace, to being a glassblower and ultimately a master glassblower, and that was quite a feat. He was involved with Robert Barber in the 1970s in coming out with this design, which is called Hanging Hearts. See the little hearts here? And Dave Fetty still makes hanging hearts, although at his age now, they're usually bigger and a little looser looking than this. It changes over time the amount of control you have on these things, and so his designs have changed with it. So you can tell the newer from the older that he's done. It's got the nice applied handle. Hanging Hearts has always been one of Fenton's more expensive and more desirable lines. At the convention, we sold one of his eggs for a few $100s. We sold the Barber bottle in this pattern and another Fetty egg for $600 a piece recently on a live sale. And so this is a pretty desirable piece. Usually they go for about $325. I'm starting it at $195. We are going to let the market bid it up from there and see where it ultimately goes. Somebody might get a heck of a deal, but there's a lot of interest in this right now. So I have a feeling that it will find its level in the marketplace. It does have the Fenton label. It does have the Fenton embossed logo, although it's very hard to see on there. So this is a 1970s piece. Measures about 6 or 6.5 inches tall, and we're going to see how it does. But boy, this has been very popular lately. It is the last piece that I have in Hanging Hearts. I started with 4 or 5 and I'm down to that. It is the only one, because I set it aside for this, that did not already sell. So if you see that, that's a great thing to collect or to buy for resale if you can. Our next item is a very handsome piece and a true antique. In fact, probably a few 100 years old at least. It can't really tell us because it is mounted to a wonderful frame that was done in the 1950s. But this is a Delft tile. Now, Delft is an area in Holland with several different companies that made ceramics over the years. And blue, of course, was their most famous thing, the Delft blue. You can see this is all hand painted and it's all done freehand. This would have all been done by hand because this is old enough to be pre-industrial, probably late 1700s. And the scene it depicts, according to the information on the back here, is a tile of the Kasurinhoefje in Hoogjordaan, which is in Amsterdam. And it says that this has been there since the 16th century. So we know that this tile was made after the 16th century, but it's great that it has an interesting background. It was mounted and framed by an antique dealer about 50 years ago, actually a little more than that, probably 60 years ago now. And so it has that mark, and this frame is very nice, but obviously 20th century and not as old as the piece itself. These are pretty good. There are a lot of people who collect these. The framing is nice. They do collect them as art pieces. The fact that it has damage, considering that it is a few 100 years old at least, is not surprising and not something that will really ding it a whole lot in terms of value either. I expect that this will probably start around $75 and we'll see where it goes from there. Next up, I have a plate from the Seattle World's Fair. I've done Seattle World's Fair things before, but this is not the World's Fair that I've done before. This is the 1909 Alaskan Yukon Pacific Exposition. You see the logo there in the round in the middle. This plate is about 7 inches and it's painted in Imari colors and done in an Imari style because it was originally something that would have been sold in the gift shop at the Japan Pavilion at the 1909 World's Fair. Now, This particular one could have been sold by stores as well because it doesn't specifically only reference the Japan Pavilion. In fact, it actually shows it has a few things wrong. It says this is Washington State University. That's actually on the other side of the state. In fact, this is the University of Washington. It was the original building on the Montlake campus, and it was used in the World's Fair as one of their buildings for the World's Fair, and several other buildings that eventually became university structures were made for the World's Fair. In fact, the University of Washington occupies the entire site now and has a wonderful view of Mount Rainier, built along an Olmsted-designed plaza because, well, the Olmsted brothers were big news back then, and they were hired to design this. So the 1909 World's Fair was notable for a number of reasons, including the first fan dancers, but also because it had this neat totem pole in Pioneer Square, and the people who would take the trolley from downtown to the World's Fair site would see the big totem pole. Well, the big totem pole turned out to have been stolen from the Tlingit tribes, and they eventually came down and stole it back. And eventually a new totem pole was erected. So that one is not there anymore. We paid for the second one, I promise. It says Seattle souvenir, so it's definitely a piece from a time when the West Coast was new and people were really curious. And a lot of people flocked to Seattle to see the fair, and a lot of them stayed and ended up being residents. So it was a very significant thing in its time. It's a true antique. I think it's nice looking, and this should sell in about the $35 to $40 range. We'll see what the market says about that. This gal is really fun, and we have the same happy countenance today, which I think is wonderful because she is Mary Hadley. If you look in the bottom, it says empty when you get there. This is very much in the tradition of Southern jug vases and face jugs that you see. They've been made for, over a century by various makers. A lot of people made them at home. Since then, they've become very popular as art pieces, and you see them done in a lot of different studio pottery and stoneware places, but you don't see a whole lot that have Mary Hadley's signature on the bottom. The Mary Hadley pottery in Louisville, Kentucky just closed in April. And the reason my friend gave me this is he said, well, you know what? I didn't pay a lot for it. I'd be curious to see what you can get for it. And he just gave it to me. Now, if it goes for a bunch of money, I'm going to give him his share, because even though he got it very cheaply and said, just have fun with it, well, you know, I believe in sharing the wealth, especially as he did for me. So soon we'll all be smiling. Mary Hadley stuff's really fun. It's so whimsical. It's hand painted. You can see all the brush strokes in it. There was a lot of handwork. I think that's why after some 80 years of production, they just couldn't do it anymore. But we will miss them, and it's so great that they left us this legacy of really fun wares. And here we go. If this was her face on mine, well, that's what I would look like. Anyhow, she's very cute. More seriously, in terms of money, none of these have sold in a really long time, and I haven't seen any sell since Mary Hadley went out of business. The prices are definitely going up because people have figured out that you can't just get it from the factory anymore. So my guess, if I had to make one, was that this should sell between $75 and potentially $150. We're going to find out together right now. Next up is, well, rather a twofer. The twofer being that we have Elton Howard of the New York Yankees and Herb Adderley of the Green Bay Packers. So we're doing a competition between types of sports cards, and we're going to see which one goes for the most. Let me tell you a little about them. The first one is this one. This is Elston Howard. He was the catcher for the New York Yankees. This is his 1956 card. He had just come up to the Yankees in 1955, and he was their first black player. This is 8 years after Jackie Robinson broke the color lines in Major League Baseball. And Elton Howard had played really well in Toronto, was called up to the Yankees, and ended up being very successful with them. He was on a bunch of various teams that went to the World Series. He had some pretty illustrious moments, and he is very well regarded nowadays as a player by people who study historic baseball. They realize that he really was quite talented in his time. And there's his stats and his information. The card is in decent shape. I have not had it graded because it is worn. And unless a card is in almost pristine condition or really rare, there's no real reason to pay to have them graded. But this one is in good overall condition. It doesn't have a lot of bumps. It doesn't have a lot of scratches or surface wear. It and the next one are going to start at $49, and we're going to see which one does better. We're going to pit baseball against football, because when these cards were made, baseball was the most popular sport in America. Now football is the most popular sport in America, and we'll be curious to see if that reflects in the prices, because this guy, Herb Adderley, is also going to start at $49. Herb Adderley, in this picture in 1964, was playing for the Green Bay Packers. He would go on to be in 4 of the first 6 Super Bowls. He was the only person who was on 4 of the first 6 Super Bowl teams. He traded to the right teams at the right time, and he was a really good halfback, and that's the reason they all wanted him. Here's the back of the card. And it's interesting to me that they spelled his name wrong. And that is another reason that this card might be a little more valuable. His name actually is Leyadderley, not Ly. And so the fact that there's an error makes this even a little more interesting. Now, this was done wrong on all of his cards, so it's not like, oh, there's only a few of these. No, they messed it up for the whole season. Anyhow, this is starting at $49 as well, and we will see whether Mr. Howard or Mr. Adderley sell for the most. Now, last month we did a contest between 2 Oz books that had the same title to see which would sell for the most. I got a large collection of Oz books, so this month I'm going to put one on, and I picked this one because it was the only one in the collection that had its original dust jacket, and because this is a rather obscure book. This is Pirates in Oz. It came out in 1931. 1931 was a really bad Depression year, and so parents weren't spending a lot of money on stuff, and so most kids wouldn't have had access to this. It has the original dust jacket. It originally sold for $1.50, which was a lot of money in 1931. It has great graphics. Now you can see, for some reason, baseballs are coming out of that galleon there. I'm not sure what that's about. I have not read this book. Maybe I'll do that before it goes away. I think that the interesting thing with this being in 1931, and it does appear to be a first edition, but it does not seem to have any color plates at all. It seems to all be drawn. So really the color is on the cover. John R. Neal, sorry about that, is the artist. And he just did such great work. So most of the color is in the cover. This is the back. It's the same as the front on the dust jacket. I'm starting this at $19.99. And the reason I'm doing that is because no copies of this seem to have sold recently. At one time, this was a $150 book. I am going to let the market tell me what it is worth today. It's not in perfect condition. The spine is cracked. It's got a little bit of yellowing inside, as you see there, but it is completely intact and there's nothing missing or ripped, and the interior is in good shape. So it's a good reading copy. We'll see what child of yesterday wants to enjoy it again. Now, gosh, this one's even a little bit hard to hold, but it's a lot of stuff. It is a handmade pull toy. This is all wooden with the metal rails here. This is not a factory piece. This is something that somebody made for their child, who is now a 95-year-old, who I'm helping sell some of his items at his request, and he decided it was time to let go of this one. His father made it for him when he was 3, so it dates back to about, what does that make it, about 1930. It's hand-painted on the front. I'm going to take it apart because it was made deliberately. He used this peg so that the elephant can pull the rest of the circus wagon around. It's quite large. It's about 18 inches by 15 inches at its tallest point, but it comes apart, so it should ship reasonably easily, and it's not very breakable, so that's helpful. It's just cute as can be. The little wheel turns around, and he nods as he goes around, and he's painted on both sides the same. And then you see this grouping here, the giraffe, and there's even a lion's head in there. Not the full lion, they just carved enough for the kid to see there was a lion in there. I think they figured that this is going to be for a little kid, and I don't have to do all of the detail to make it look quite as fancy as the elephant itself. It's a really cute piece. It's a one-of-a-kind piece, and I am finding more and more that I'm drawn to things that I know are the only one ever made, because frankly, not only does it mean that you have something interesting that people haven't seen before, but it also means there's not another one to compete with it, right? So I like handmade things. I like folk art. I really think it's wonderful to show the stuff that people would just craft for their families back in the day. There's not so many people who have these skills anymore. There was a time when pretty much anybody's dad would have gone into a wood shop and just cranked something like this out. That's not really true anymore. Not that many people have those skills. So a lot of people are really starting to appreciate these, and I'm curious to see how much this might be appreciated on eBay. We'll find out. Our next two items are a different kind of competition between similar items, and these are both sub-miniature cameras. Now, the first one would have been advertised by Bancrofts or other companies like this, probably in the back of comic books, because if you see who it went to Miss Eloise, and Miss Eloise lived in Marietta, Ohio. I found this in a store there during the convention. Miss Eloise ordered this perhaps to spy on a fellow sibling, or because she thought she'd have fun with it in some way, but in reality, she didn't really use it much, because it has the original Kiku film, panchromatic. This is right after World War II. So these are made in Japan, this particular one. It's got another roll of film that may have been shot. Then yes, you can get this old obsolete film for these cameras, and yes, you can actually shoot it and develop it. And then there's all the paperwork. It's been wonderful serving you. Thank you so much from the Bancrofts. It's got the original box. It's the most complete of these little kits I've ever seen, and it even shows you that if you are not able to develop it locally, you can send it to Cicero, Illinois, and have it developed. I don't know if that outfit's still there, but there are other places that will do it for you. It's got its original case. The snaps work great. There's no damage, and the best part is in here, of course. Let's get it out so you can see it. Here is our little camera in the case and out of the case, and it is in full working order. And yes, you could actually use this tiny little 1.5 or 2 inch camera. It's really, really neat. I think these are fun. I've looked for them all the time that I've been a dealer, and I've sold many of them. I've never had one with the original box and paperwork, and I have to say I was surprised. I'm glad I got this with the box and paperwork, because that gave me a moment to look it up, and that's a good thing to know. If you've been doing eBay a long time, or selling in the real world a long time, it's really easy to think, oh yeah, I know what those go for. I know what those go for. Well, things change. It really does pay to update your knowledge, because these are now selling for over $50, especially with all of these pieces in a lot of cases. So I was thinking that it might only sell for 30 or 35. We will see in this event what it does do, and we will see how it does compared to our next camera, which is also a miniature camera, but this one wouldn't have been sold in a comic book. By this time, these are being sold to adults. This is a Minox. This is a German little miniature camera, or sub-miniature camera, and it shows what kind of film it takes. It's able to do all the things a regular camera can do. It's got this tiny, tiny, tiny little window, and I just think it's really great that it's got its original case on the chain. The case is made to stay on the chain, which is kind of a neat thing. We have the Minox mark on the back. Minox primarily did miniaturization in Germany. I haven't seen a lot of big cameras by this company, but I've seen a lot of varieties of sub-miniature cameras by them. Funny that they're from Germany. My grandmother took a train trip through Germany in the 1970s with one of these. They told her, do not take pictures when you're crossing to Berlin through East Germany, and she did, and she almost was taken off the train. Her camera was taken off the train. We never got to see those pictures. In any event, I think this should be a fun addition to someone's collection, and a lot of people, including younger people, are getting into taking old-time pictures with film cameras because it's something different, and the qualities of the photos and what you get out of it is something different. So I think it will go to somebody who will probably use it. Our next item is something that, you know, I don't shy away from controversy, and I'm not going to shy away from this controversy either. Although it is vintage, it is a political t-shirt, and it is a protest t-shirt, and it takes a side. I just want to say that I do not take a side where these things are concerned. I am simply showing product, and I leave it to the market to decide what they like and what they don't like. So with all those caveats, I will show you this. It's from the 1990s. On the front, it says Flush Rush. And on the back, it says, I think, therefore, I don't listen to Rush Limbaugh. This was done in the 1990s when Rush Limbaugh became a nationally syndicated radio host and started the conservative talk radio phenomena. And a lot of people definitely agreed with him, and a lot of people didn't. And this would have been worn by one or given to somebody. Actually, the story behind this one is it was given by somebody who was liberal to someone who was conservative, and they politely took it and kept it in a drawer and never wore it, which is why it's in such good condition. But they didn't throw it away. It does appear to be single stitch, which is correct for that era. It's a Hanes Beefy tee. It looks to me like it was, let's see what size we have here. This one is a large adult, and it looks to me like this was made in the USA. So again, we know vintage because they don't really make this stuff in the USA much anymore. So the reason I'm putting this on is because there's a whole lot of pro-Rush Limbaugh stuff that has sold that is vintage, and there is a collector market for it because it's political memorabilia. It is not one that I have seen sell of late at all. So I think they're kind of hard to find now. And because of that, I'm going to give it a try. We're going to start it, I believe, at just $9.99, and we will see what the market thinks of that. Rush, of course, passed away recently, and because of that, you know, I don't generally like to speak ill of the dead, but the t-shirt came out when he was alive and well. So there you go. We are in a political year, so we're going to be hearing about political items, and I figured, well, this is a good time to put this one out, and we'll see what the market has to say about it. And last but not least, yes, it is football season. Football season is upon us, and in its honor, I thought that since this had such great graphics, and it was almost Leroy Neiman-esque, although he is not the artist on this, but it has that sort of color, that sort of impressionism that he was known for. This was done by Rawlings. It is a Rawlings Professional top grain leather football in the original box, and you can see it was made for J.C. Penney's. It says right there, and it's got all the information. This would have been done about 1970, and I'll take the ball out so that you can see it exists. I know that a lot of my audience on YouTube are not interested specifically in sporting items, but most of them know someone who is. And in eBay land, we have men and women who are customers, and I like to try to find things for both. So this is a great example. It has never actually been taken out of the box and used. So it is in perfect condition. It could use some air. I don't think anybody at this point is going to use this. I think it's going to be for display. I have not seen one in this box sell for a while now. I've seen newer boxes. I've seen things that were team logo. My feeling in this box is that this is probably a $30 item. I'm going to start it around 20, and we're going to let people decide how they feel, and if they want to make a forward pass for this, then I am all ears, and we will see what they have to say about it. I am so glad to get to do these for you. It's always fun to put aside a range of items and try to find things that I think will be interesting to my audience and educational and hopefully informative, and also perhaps something that you like to collect. And so I have a lot of fun perusing these. If you are interested in following the links and seeing how things turn out with the auctions, you can do that. My eBay is the Antique Nomad, so it's easy. And if you are curious to buy something, well, just hit the links and you will be able to see if that item is still available. Links are in the description below. So thank you so much. I appreciate our level 2 and 3 members who help make it possible, and thank you from me and from everybody else who gets to see this for your support that makes that happen. So thanks again. Great to see you all, and we'll see how these things do, and we'll report back with what's sold and for how much later in the month. Take care and bye for now. Thanks for joining me again in the fun and fascinating antique community here where online meets the real world. Please click the subscribe button below, click the bell to be notified when new videos upload, leave a comment below, and hit thumbs up to like this video. Links to our online social media and our items for sale are in the description. This is George at the Antique Nomad. Bye for now.